Hi, just wanted to make a video and talk a little bit about discussion forums. You will see that your grades are posted for the first one, and we're about to have our second discussion forum here beginning tomorrow. So I'm recording this on Sunday, the 30th of August. Now, let me ask you first, please, if you have not yet completed the quiz for Chapter 2 and then the test for Chapters 1 and 2, the cumulative test together, don't spend any more time with this video. It's not about those quizzes. You will, if you still need to take those, your time would be better spent continuing to study. And remember, those are due at 11 p.m. this evening. Both of those are due. You need to start well before the time that it's due. Allow yourself, I would say, an hour for each one. You don't have quite that long to give either one of them, but in no case would I start after 9 o'clock. I mean, of course, if that's the only option you have, of course you'd want to do it. You just may not be able to spend all the time you'd want to, or all the time you're allowed to take the quiz. Now, with that out of the way, I'm assuming that if we're going any further than this point, you have already taken both of those quizzes that are due, or that were due, on August the 30th. And I want to talk a little bit about discussion forums. Now that you can see the grades on the first forum, you'll understand a little bit more about my expectation, but you probably don't understand as much about about the way I'll grade those forums, because the first forum is a little bit unusual. Number one, because of a number of things, including technology issues. And by the way, I'm recording this from the home office I share with my wife, and the audio quality will be atrocious. I can guarantee you that. That's why I would rather record in my office, but it's important that I get this information out there. The second thing you should know is that the grades for the forum the first forum that you did, I just posted those today, uncharacteristically late for me. Although I want to set your expectation about forum grades. I will always have forum grades graded before your next forum opens. So there's basically a 2-week period there. As a normal rule, I will usually get them graded a little bit more quickly than I have done this time. Especially the first week or two, I'm appalled to see that I have not actually interacted with you meaningfully outside of individual interactions for the last 9 days on the site, and that's really a bigger space than I would normally have. If you have questions, that's a kind of a long period for me to have had as few emails or phone calls as I have had. If you have other questions, please utilize the contact information in the syllabus and contact me directly. Let me repeat my phone number one more time, because like many of you, our family has shared phone numbers back and forth, and my son now has my old mobile number, and I've reviewed the syllabus and don't see where I have that number on there, and yet I've had a couple of student calls. I'm not really sure. I don't think they were from OCCC this semester, so somehow I've gotten old information out there, or someone is giving you old information. If you want to contact me, and I encourage you, if you need to contact me immediately, I will take your call at my mobile phone, and I will answer it if I'm able to answer it, and that number is 405-659-3180. That's the number you can call. Of course, my preference, as we have discussed before, as I have discussed with you, is email to the OCCC address. That is really the best way to contact me, but if you need to call me, I understand. Please do that. I would prefer that you call and not text. Texting opens a whole nother means of communication. It's very hard to control. Now, with that little caveat out of the way, let's talk more about discussion forums. My grading comments this time were also very brief and fairly stylized, not much personal interaction. That will not, again, be characteristic of forums as we go forward, but the first forum is really not a lot for me to grade. It was introducing yourself, if you will recall, and so I want to use that forum to make you aware of the way that I count off. If you may have had a deduction for using the wrong word, or misspelling a word. We'll talk about those very quickly. Yes, I am an English teacher. My first degree was, one of my master's degrees is a Master of Liberal Arts with an emphasis in English and creative writing. And so, yes, I am going to be aware of whether you're using professional language and have the basics of English communication down. As a businessman that has dealt with many businesses who talk to me a lot, and as a program director at a university, many businesses talk to me about what they want in graduates, and the top two things that they always talk about are, Scott, we want people who can communicate in writing better than your graduates do, that are clear and accurate in their English communications, both in writing and in speaking and presenting. So as you go through your college career, I hope that you're focusing on these things. Even though I am an English teacher, I don't grade these as if they were English submissions. So in other words, this is like horseshoes. Yes, it does count if you're pretty close. You'll see that what I count off for also carries very small point penalties. So run-on sentences, incomplete sentences, failure to capitalize words correctly, wrong use of apostrophes, wrong verb forms, or wrong word choice, these are all 1-point deductions. In other words, you can make a few errors and still make an A on every one of your forums. And this is the typical result for those of you who really try to submit your best work in a forum response. It's only 250 words, which is not a long writing assignment. It really isn't. As you go forward in your career and do assessments, for instance, on patients, these easily are going to exceed much longer than this. So you need to be ready to provide that kind of a length. Let me congratulate you for what you did well. And I am sorry, I'm going to do something. I don't know what to look at here. I've got two cameras, and I'm honestly not sure which one I'm talking to. So I'm going now. I've got kind of one place to look. I like to look at you, and hopefully you don't look like I'm. I always thought when people make videos and they're always looking around like this, they look shifty, or they look like they don't know what they're talking about. So I want to make sure that you can see that I'm not concealing anything, and so hopefully that will help a little bit. You're back to discussion questions. Sorry for interrupting myself. Back to discussion questions. The good things that I have seen on the discussion questions. Firstly, everyone that submitted this time did over 250 words. A couple of you did exactly 250 words. I get the idea that you're counting the last few. So good. Y'all made that requirement. That is a requirement that I'm pretty firm about. If you submit fewer than 250 words, I'll count off about 2 points for every 25 words. And I think, as I have explained already, and maybe in this form, if you present less than 50 words or fewer than 50 words, I'm probably going to come back and say, I'm not going to give you credit unless you finish this assignment. These assignments are designed to really not be answerable in so few words. You haven't given it sufficient thought. And you need to demonstrate that in writing. That's part of the requirements for this course, is demonstrate your thought process in writing. Before I said those ugly words, though, I wanted to make sure that you had seen the way I grade, so that if you have fear about your English usage, you will see that you can get through these forums with a perfectly good grade, because even though I'm going to create point differentials, and I insist on doing that for these technical errors in grammar, they're not going to be large point differentials. If you submit a response is way too short, that can be a large point differential. If you fail to discuss one of the required parts of the assignment, that can be a point differential that's larger, typically about, say, 10 points. In this last introduction, I want to congratulate you. Every one of you answered both questions. And that is, sometimes I'll have someone who doesn't answer the second part about online versus in-class education, and it's really something I want to collect data on and something I'm interested in, and more importantly, it is part of the assignment. So reading assignments carefully, even for simple tasks like this, is an indicator of the way you need to train yourself, especially for medical work, to be approach your, whether it's an assignment in this class or whether it's later on something you're supposed to do that's related to your job and health professions. You want to be comprehensive and accurate in your assessment of the request and your ability to comply with it. You don't give half the meds and then give up because you just didn't read. I'm sorry, I just didn't read the last part of that, and so that is why the patient, had a stroke in their hospital room. That's those are not acceptable in that environment. We're going to practice with much smaller things at stake here. 10 points is at stake. So please keep that in mind that you're going to address every part of the assignment. By the way, when I say discussions and forums, that's interchangeable language here. Some of these are forums. You'll see later in the course we'll have some where we actually are discussing things with each other, a true forum. Your first one was an individual post and you could see everybody else's. Your second one is still an individual post. There's no requirement to respond to somebody else's post on this one, but this is going to be one where you don't get to read other people's posts until you've posted your own. This is a QA type forum. This can be a little confusing when you go in to submit your answer, so please, I've tried to put very explicit instructions there, but please listen now when I say click on my question when you go to the forum, and then down in the lower right hand corner you'll have a little link that says reply like normal, and click there and give me your response. After you post your response, you'll then be able to see other students' responses. Now, as we go forward, this is going to be more typical than not. I will usually have this requirement to get it started off that you post your own first. And I've explained this in detail. I can't remember if it's for this class, but if it's not, let me recapitulate just very briefly. Why would I do that? I do that because completely separate from the issues about people not presenting original work is the problem of students, of the framing effect, of the first student answering something a certain way and considering maybe 2 out of 7 possibilities, and every student that comes in later lines up and has the same thoughts and ends up commenting on the first post. I know if you've been taking discussion questions very long, I know that you've experienced this, and it's an unintended consequence of the way that we often run discussion forums that would creates a huge lack of diversity in our responses, and that's what I'm interested in, your own personal feelings about this, not your comment on somebody else's personal feelings about this. That's why I do it that way. Not to even those of you who are good students who give good responses and can tell by the way I graded your first one that several of you, probably a third of the class perhaps, made a 100 on that first forum response because you answered both questions. You didn't have any significant errors of grammar or spelling, capitalization, and so that's good enough. The rest of that content, of course, is supplied by you about you, so I have no comment about whether it's true or false or good or bad. As we go forward, though, that's going to be part of the assessment. There are going to be some situations, again, the second form is still opinion-based, but later on we'll have forms then that are not just opinion-based, that are research-based. You're going to look something up, and there's a right answer and a wrong answer, or a better answer and a worse answer, as is usually more often the case when you're in as you go to more advanced college type studies. Usually we're not talking about yeses and nos, right? We're talking about better answer, not so good an answer, especially in health professions. Get used to that caveat whenever you talk, when professors talk to you about your education. There's some special requirements in health professions. We can't turn out people who are faking it, because that kills people and hurts people. So it starts now. It starts now with being disciplined in your mind, disciplined in what you want to accomplish, and willing to use your own original thoughts and give it a little bit of effort. 10 minutes won't do on the discussion question that's coming up. It has 3 separate parts, and while they're opinion based, they do require you to go out and look at some resources. I think when the instructions become available, actually I think you can see the instructions now. You won't be able to post your response until Monday, and as I recall now, it's one of the reasons I wanted to get this video out. You probably received an email that was unintentional. Usually when I open a discussion forum, I do not send an email out like that, because we're all aware of the schedule. Monday morning, as a matter of fact, midnight tonight, that discussion question will become available, and you can respond at that point. Of course, you won't be ready to respond at midnight tonight. You've got a whole week to work with it and look at it. If the last discussion forum took you 15 minutes to respond to, this one will probably take you an hour, because there are 3 separate parts that have to do with looking at some of the resources we have out there and reflecting on what you did this week. This is the week that we're just finishing tonight, so that you can start to assess your own study habits and how you're approaching it. I think this is one of these forums that is not difficult to do and may actually be very enlightening for you if you've never gone through this process before, of actually saying, how did I learn that? Did I do well learning it? And if I didn't, why? Is it just that I didn't spend enough time? Or is there specifically something I could do to enhance the kind of resources I need? Some people need to see things. Some people need to read things. Some people need to talk about things. And in medical terminology, this is true just as with any other thing you're going to approach. Know thyself. I believe it's Socrates that first issued that famous dictum. If you want to know yourself first, and then you'll know what you're capable of, you'll know what you need, you'll know how you learn best, and when you're not getting that, you can supplement it for yourself. That's what the second discussion forum is all about. After you post yours, again, don't have to respond to anybody else, but I think, again, it would be very informative for you to read a few other posts that are out there at some point, because you're going to get a notion of, if everybody replies independently, I think you're going to be astounded at the ranges of opinions. Some people really have to see something. Some people really enjoy interacting with it, sort of kinetic learners. And of course, all of us, nobody's one thing or another. All learners, including me, including everybody I've ever met, when you get right down to it, that's a preference. They're capable of learning in all kinds of ways, and as a matter of fact, free tip that I'll give you right now, as I have found, still in education, still in a doctoral program, have 2.5 master's degrees. So I've been in school pretty much continuously my whole life, either even while I'm teaching, even while I'm administrating, I am learning. I love to learn, love to be in class, love to be the student, not just the teacher. And I have found that if I absorb information more than one way, I'm much more likely to get a firm grasp on it. If I'm in a lecture situation, I listen while I take notes, even though, frankly, I'm one of these people, I'm probably never going to go back to those notes again, except in special select occasions, and with more technical information I might go back to those notes. But normally the reason I'm taking notes is because when I'm sitting there in front of the computer screen just like you are, and I'm about to select my answer A, B, C, or D on the multiple choice test, more often than not I remember what I wrote because I wrote it while I was listening to it, and when I wrote it down, I saw it. So I've got 3 ways instantaneously in a lecture that I am learning information, and this is a fact of human physiology that reinforces my learning process. I wrote it, I saw what I wrote, I heard it being spoken, maybe I repeated it out loud. I study for a lot of things by going back to my source materials like the textbook and reading it out loud as if I'm lecturing to myself. Try it. If you haven't ever done that, if you're an auditory learner, you may be very surprised at the way that enhances your memory. Taking information in more than one way. This discussion forum will also let you, as an alternative to 3 resources that I've shared with you, to go out and find your own resources. And I may post a separate video. I'm trying to keep these individual weekly videos down to well under 30 minutes, by the way. But this will, if you go out and find your own materials, you may want to share them with the class, and I may post a separate video or separate maybe document about resources that I have on my iPhone. There's some good things out there. I'll just tell you about one real quick. Pearson, the publisher of your medical terminology book, makes a medical terminology word scramble app. I don't think that one's free. It may be. I think it is free now that I think about it. But it's exactly chapter for chapter the words that are in your textbook, but will help you with spelling. Now, there's not a lot of emphasis in spelling in this course, except in this way. When you're responding in the discussion forums, I've already said I take a point off for misspelled words. I take 2 points off for medical words that are misspelled, because it's particularly important that you learn how to spell them. Now, it seems impossible sometimes. How can I learn to spell all those? But the material that we're just getting into here, combining medical words together as we start chapter 3, we'll be looking at the digestive system. And so we'll be looking now at actually combining medical words, word parts. And I would just encourage you, as we go through chapter 3, really dive into chapter 3, because it's an investment. The word parts you learn in chapter 3, and even in chapters 1 and 2, obviously, but especially as we get into the anatomy and physiology of the digestive system, you're going to find that word parts that you use in chapter 3 are going to show up again in chapter 16 and chapter 8 and chapter 12 and chapter 4, all the chapters, because that's how medical language works. Learn those word parts. Learn that itis, I-T-I-S, on the end of a word means what? Inflammation. Now put it with anything, right? Hepatitis. Hepatitis is, hepata means liver. Hepatitis would be inflammation of the liver, right? But what about pericarditis? Well, you can look up the pericardium, and you'll find out that means the sac that's on the outside layer of the heart is the pericardium. And what happens if that's inflamed? We just add itis to the end of it, pericarditis. So that, which would mean inflammation of that layer on the outside of the heart. Itis is a very common ending. You ought to know what it means, and it's a good example of how something you're going to, when we talk about gastroenteritis next week, we're saying gastro, stomach, entero, intestine. What's the inflammation of the stomach and the intestine? Gastroenteritis. So itis, inflammation. It's a beautiful thing because you learn it in week 3, and now you've got this little word part. Think of it as a bag of word parts that you're going to put together. And unlike learning a language, we don't have to learn the syntax. I've mentioned this before, meaning that those word parts are descriptive on their own, and you can recognize them and use them, and you can put them together like little puzzle pieces. I'm planning to deploy some activities that will help you do that, but of course you've got a lot of resources right now if you stop and think about it. You've got exercises in the back of the book. Those are not required for points, but they're excellent practice if you find that you're having problems. Of course, your textbook, the definitions that you'll find in the back of the textbook list word parts as prefixes, suffixes, or combining forms. Combining forms usually have to do with the anatomy and the anatomy of the human body. So the majority of those combining forms are going to refer to your brain or your ear or your cranium or your shoulder or your armpit, right? Anatomical parts of your body. And then the prefixes and suffixes tend to be those things that describe the physiology or the pathology, the disease process that's going on in those individual anatomical parts. Now, I'm coming up on 26 minutes right now, and so let me just wind up by saying this video was supposed to be about discussion forums. And so when you get a chance Monday, just be aware this is a more complicated discussion forum than you had in week 1. It's going to require a little bit more time, I would say a good hour, and you do yourself a service to get in there as soon as you're finished with this week's work. Get in there and read it, say by tomorrow. Read what it is you're going to do, and that will help you mentally understand and prepare mentally for what you need to be able to write about there. I'll encourage you one other way, or I'll give you one other good piece of advice. When I grade discussion forums, you can see on these, as brief as my responses are, I read every word of every forum. I really do. And so you will see me make word corrections there that I would not be making unless I was the kind of instructor who wasn't reading the forums. And of course my responses I think will be more detailed as we move forward, but you will continue to be able to see that I read every single one of your responses and I read them in detail. I do that by offloading those responses into a Word document. And you know what my Word document tells me? If you have the settings on there, it immediately helps me identify misspelled words, although in medical terminology there are quite a few words that won't show up in your standard dictionary, but you'll have to be responsible for those in many cases. But regular words, turn on your grammar checker and help you identify some of the word confusions. If you're having trouble with there and there, or it's and its, ITS or IT apostrophe S, words like this that are more difficult maybe in usage, or maybe you haven't had good usage example for you, let your amazing computer technology do some of this work for you and work to get rid of those color indicators, the blue ones that indicate poor word choice, the little blue squigglies, the green squigglies that indicate bad grammar, run-on sentences and things like that, the red squigglies that indicate misspelled words. You have every ability to look at your own work just like I'm going to look at it and give yourself a break. You can, if you've got some squigglies on there, stop and think about it. Is that really the way you want to say it? No, not every squiggly is right. The computer program is not always right. And you can see by the way I graded your first forum, I'm not out to get you. If your meaning is clear and your grammar is not egregiously terrible, I'm going to usually not count off for that. I want it to meet the standard of clear professional communication, because this is part of how we use medical language. All right, I feel like I have probably covered the points I wanted to cover about discussion forums, and I'll post this video up. It's going to be just under 30 minutes if I hit the button now.